Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. You are listening to the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci. That's me. Today's episode is a new kind of episode, and it is a recording of a recent LinkedIn Live. So if you're on LinkedIn, you and I might very well be connected already. If we're not connected, we should definitely do that. I've mentioned that in recent podcasts. Here's why that's so important, because thankfully from LinkedIn, they've accepted our application to do and be a host of LinkedIn Live. So if you've been on LinkedIn, you've probably seen people doing live broadcasts over the last 6 or 12 months. And we're one of those people that gets to do that now. So pretty darn stoked about the ability to do that. And so we're going to be doing LinkedIn Lives. And a lot of times, just like a lot of social platforms or business platforms like LinkedIn, you might not always see or hear those LinkedIn Lives while we're doing them, or you might completely miss it from your LinkedIn feed. So every so often, we are going to make sure to take some of those recordings from LinkedIn and move those into podcasts. So most of the LinkedIn Lives will do somewhere between 10 and 15, 20 minutes, somewhere around there. As far as I know, that can always change. And I always want to make sure to bring you some tactical, strategic, or operational advice when it comes to running and scaling your startup. So pumping out tons of content on LinkedIn, and including these LinkedIn Lives. So I want to make sure that you don't miss it either. So some people like to listen to stuff, some people like to watch stuff, other people like to read stuff. So if you're one of those listening kinds of people, which you probably are, that's why you're listening to the podcast, this way is a chance for you to never miss some of the stuff that we are sharing on LinkedIn. So that's it. So this episode, you'll hear in just a moment, was recorded about a week ago, about mid-August, at the time that I'm doing this recording. And the topic is going from zero to one. And specifically, I was talking about my experience at Blend. So many of you know I was the first head of sales over at Blend, which is a lending software platform. I was a head of sales back in 2013, 14, 15, when we were first launching, getting the product to market, getting those first customers, getting those first couple of million in revenue. And more recently now, since then, Blend just last week announced a Series F round of financing and officially became a unicorn when it comes to the valuation. So they're now valued at $1.7 billion, which is pretty damn cool for the team that's been working there really, really hard. I'm excited for Nima and Roscoe, Eugene, Aaron, the founders there, to help them continue to see their division of the company getting fulfilled. And it's certainly the reason that I joined the company way back when I was the first head of sales. So I talked a bit about, what were some of the key elements to getting from 0 to 1 in those earliest days at Blend. And so that's the topic of the LinkedIn Live recording that I did. And that's what you're about to hear. So that's it for now. Again, I think my only ask of this episode for you is, again, check us out on LinkedIn. If you haven't connected with me, just find me. I'm the only Scott Sambucci that I know of on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find. Send me a note to say, hey, heard you on the podcast, want to connect. I will connect you there. That way you can always make sure to be notified whenever we are going live, whenever we're posting some of the content. We're also posting events there now as I'm running trainings, webinars, other online events over the course of the coming months. You'll get notified about those as well. And that's it for now. So let's head over to my conversation with myself over on LinkedIn. See ya. Hey, Scott Sambucci here, and I am now live on LinkedIn. Thank you, LinkedIn. Appreciate you approving the application. I'm excited to be here and also streaming this live session as well into Facebook and YouTube as well. LinkedIn has been kind of our go-to place. It's the place where most of the people that we work with every single day are hanging out and spending time and learning from each other. So excited to be able to deliver live sessions now on LinkedIn. And so, a lot of times, going into these live sessions, I've done lots of webinars, I've done Facebook Lives, I've done lots of videos that many of you might have seen here on LinkedIn. I don't always have a prescription, or I don't always have a plan. And certainly when it comes to doing these kinds of live videos, the question might be like, what are you going to talk about first? And the way I was thinking about this is really, I think the way I thought I'd start this is giving just a little bit of insight and some perspective around a question I get all the time, which is around my experience as the first head of sales at Blend. So those of you who follow headlines and look at
unicorn status startups and those sorts of things. If you've seen some of the headlines of the last day, Blend, which is a lending platform selling into some of the largest banks in the world, is just got another round of funding, a Series F round, $75 million from Canopy Ventures. And that funding round is now elevated Blend to official unicorn status. So it's now a $1.7 billion valuation company. That's a lot of zeros. And I was the first head of sales there. And so the work that I did obviously is very different than the work that happens there every single day now. When I look at the list of customers they have and look at the number of loans that they're processing every day and the dollar amounts of the monetary value of those loans, it's frankly absurd to me to think about the dollar volume and the transaction volume and the percentage of the loans in the United States that are going through Blend's platform, because I was there before we had customer number one. That was my job. And so one of the questions I get all the time is like, what was it like? How did you get from 0 to 1, as Peter Thiel would say? How did you get from those first, getting from 0 customers to the first customer, to the third customer, to the 10th customer? And so I thought it might be timely and appropriate, maybe just to share a couple of lessons and a couple of things that we worked on every single day in those first couple of years, getting from 0 to those first few customers. So for context, when I joined Blend, I think it was the end of 2013. It's been a while, so the years get a little muddled. Pretty sure it was the end of 2012, maybe is what it was. And I walked into Blend initially as a consultant. So I'd known Nima Gamsari and Roscoe Hill, or 2 of the co-founders, since their time at Palantir. So they were at Palantir, and I sold them data that they used to help with fixing a lot of the mortgage portfolios that were completely blown to smithereens after the housing market crash. And so that's where they cut their teeth in the mortgage market. That's how I got to know them. And over the years, we stayed in touch. And once I saw that Nima had started Blend, I sort of kind of followed it a little bit. They were mostly in stealth mode. And I just had sent him a LinkedIn message one day and just said, hey, I saw that you moved from Palantir. Congrats on the work so far. And that led to a coffee meeting, which led to another couple of meetings. And then about a month or 2 later, they asked me to come in as a consultant, basically to help them identify, like, is there a sale here? Is the platform sale ready? And so my job really was to just go out and start finding meetings and identifying if the technology that had been built had a place in the market. And so I was eventually became employee number 13. So in those first couple of months, we were able to get our first customer, landing a contract with Freddie Mac for a couple $100,000. And while their application of the product wasn't exactly as it was intended to give us a customer, give us revenue, and really start to validate the idea that, okay, there could be a business model here that could be sustainable. And so from there, I moved from consultant status into employee status. So I was employee number 13 there. And at the time, it was me and 12 engineers and co-founders. And that office, not too small, kind of small, but not too small, on 9th and Mission, which, if you know San Francisco, is not a great neighborhood. Back then was not, still is not. And so getting from that 0 to 1, with that first customer, while that first customer wasn't exactly the perfect, ideal customer profile over the long run, now seeing that Blend is doing hundreds of or billions of dollars worth of mortgages every day, it's kind of absurd to think about when you think about the numbers there. And so the question I get a lot of times is like, so how did you get those first customers? What was it like to get those first few lenders? And so I just wrote down a couple of notes here on a Post-it note. And what did it take? I guess the question is like, what did it take to get on that path to becoming a $1.7 billion company? And there was just 4 things I wrote down. There's probably a lot more. I know there's a lot more, but these are the 4 that just were top of mind as I was sketching this out on a Post-it note. So number 1 is the founding team. Like, the founding team more than anything, when I looked at working with Nima and Roscoe, because I'd known them and their work, I knew how focused they were on the problem in the mortgage marketplace that they uncovered while working at Palantir. I got to know Eugene Marinelli once I started working there at Blend, and also Aaron Collard, who was the CFO at the time, and up until pretty recently. Knowing them and knowing how much they cared about solving this problem. Like whenever I talk to Nima about this, and it's still the case today, and you can see this in his interviews that he does on CNBC, it's never been, for them, it was never about how much valuation can we build, how big of a company can we build. It was always about the mission of the company, which is like, we have to fix the mortgage market. The way mortgages are getting originated is absurd. It's wrong. It's not a great customer experience. There's not good data flow all the way through the system, and the lack of data flow is what led to the housing crash in the first place. So if we're going to prevent a housing crash from happening again, we got to fix the mortgage origination system and the entire mortgage process. And so had always been the message from day one for them, and that focus and that concentration, and never worrying about how long. Like, never once did I, when I talked to Nima in 2012 or 2013, when we were doing our first big implementations, never once did we sit around the table and say, gosh, in 7 years, I hope we get an exit. Or never once was the question about, how big of a valuation can we get, or when can we get the next funding round so that we can pump up the valuation even more. Those are never conversations that we had. Everything that we did was always about, what's the problem we can solve? Who are the customers we're helping out with right now? What do we need to do to get to the next phase of growth? And that was it. So the number one biggest factor in those early stages is having that founder team that was just so mission driven and so focused on the vision of where they wanted to take not just the company, but really just lead the whole marketplace, which is what they're doing now. That was like factor number one that gets you from 0 to 1, right? You can't be doing it for the money. You can't be doing it for the valuation. You can't be doing it because you like talking to VCs and hope to get the next round of capital from whatever VC is the hot one today, right? Number two factor, and there's 4 that I want to talk about here. So number 1 is the founders. Number 2 factor is do the work. Do the work. And what I mean by that, and I see this every day when we coach, startups, and I talk to literally hundreds of company founders every year. When it comes down to like getting liftoff, getting those first 10 customers, and even going from 10 to, getting off the ground and getting to the first $1 million in revenue, you got to do the work. And what I mean by do the work is be willing to do anything and everything it takes to make sure that those first customers are successful. And even before you get them as customers, be willing to do anything and everything possible to get the meetings and to have the conversations and to get consensus at those early customers. I remember getting some introductions from some investors to some executives over at banks, or working through my network of people that I had talked with over the years in the mortgage market pre-Blend. And, there were days, like whole mornings or afternoons, where I'd be sitting at my desk typing up emails and LinkedIn messages to people, trying to set up meetings at conferences. And, I left, like, to come work at Blend for additional context. I had been working at CoreLogic. I spent some time in startups, took a break. And then after I took a break, got back into working in the startup world. And with that break that I took was working at CoreLogic, which is a publicly traded company. And at CoreLogic, like, I had a pretty cushy executive job. Like, I didn't do a whole lot of work. Basically sat on conference calls, did some client travel, worked with reps out in the field, did lots of conference work, going to meet with different executives, working with an internal team to deliver on solutions, those sorts of things. But like, end of the day, I did very little work and was making executive level salary. So, with base and bonus, like I was well into the approaching 400K per year. And like my life as a salesperson was sort of like behind me. So I thought, I wasn't doing cold calling or wasn't doing prospecting. I wasn't setting meetings. I would have a sales rep, an account executive that's covering Wells Fargo, or was covering US Bank, or was covering Regions Bank, or whatever big institution it was out there. They would call me up and say, "Hey, I'm going to, going to Chicago. I'm going to Tuscaloosa. I'm going to Jacksonville, whatever the big bank was. Could you come travel with me for the day? Because I want to set up a list of meetings. I want to get your expertise to have them talk to these executives at these banks so we can like sell some of these solutions." So I wasn't setting meetings. I was just getting asked to join, and I'd just show up and do my thing and, offer whatever expertise I could. And that was it. Like, so my like raw selling days were like, I felt way behind me. Once I got into working at Blend, like my job, I reverted back to being an SDR. And that's what I mean as an example of like being willing to do the work. There was nothing, I was never looked at that as like being below me. That was just part of the work that it took to get those meetings, to get those conversations going, following up on every single call with summarizing the meeting and then getting the next meeting booked and following up with people and putting together PowerPoints. I remember doing some of the early implementations where one of our customers, after we had run data through our platform every day, they wanted a report at the end of the day, and we didn't even have a dashboard yet. I remember the executive asking me, like, "Hey, when can I log in to see the dashboard?" And I said, "Let me check with the VP of engineering." I went over to Justin. I'm like, "Hey, when can Jason see the dashboard?" And I remember Justin saying, "What dashboard?" So like we had sold this workflow software, we implemented it. I was thinking there was this dashboard feature that was going to be available, and it just wasn't there. It didn't exist. So what that meant is at the end of the day, Justin had to export data out of our database, give me a CSV file. I put that CSV file into a spreadsheet. And then the data from the spreadsheet additionally had to be put into a PowerPoint presentation that another executive at the company was using on a weekly update meeting on a portfolio he was managing. And guess who did all that work? I did, and we did as a team. Sitting in a hotel room at 2:00 in the morning doing QA testing before rolling out a new workflow release. Town Place suites. I still can remember the eggs and the horrible coffee. Like, that's what I mean by do the work. So people say like, "Oh, how do I scale my startup?" Like, you don't scale your startup. When you're a startup, you do the work and you worry about getting those next customers, and then you scale up, and then you worry about scaling much, much later. Like, even before you scale up, you have to ramp up sales, and that's a whole nother conversation. So that's premise number 2, is just like do the work. And that went for everybody on the team. Guys like Justin, I mentioned, the VP of engineering. We had Pranay, who was our VP of product. I remember another meeting that we had in the lobby of a hotel before going to do a presentation, the 4 of us sitting around one of those small tables with the laptops open, trying to figure out what slides to build for this presentation, what data should go into, what should the graphic be, and how should we present the platform, and lots of those conversations. And everybody, all hands on deck. We had one of the engineers, Devin Yang, for the first implementation that we did of workflow in Dallas, and he was I was finding bugs, and he was fixing them that day. He's sitting in the cubicle pushing code throughout the course of the day. And it was just like a mindset across the whole company that people would do the work. We had account managers, a guy named Yen, and another one named Ram, another guy named Charles. And I'll get to them in just a moment. All willing to travel anywhere, anytime to go work with customers on implementations and stay in hotels in places like Southern New Jersey, South Jersey, and Jacksonville, and all of these other places. So just being willing to do the work is number 2. Number 3 is team. So I mentioned Yen and Ram and Charles. Those were some of the first people we brought on board. I brought on board for our team. And our sales team wasn't even a sales team. I called it a customer success team, because everything, which leads me to number 4, it's all about implementation. I'll get to that in a moment. Hiring that team and hiring people that were really smart and really focused on that mission. And it started with Nima and Roscoe and Eugene saying, we want to fix this problem. That, is what got me excited, because I went from making $400K a year to $100,000 base salary and commuting 2.5 hours each way via train from Davis to San Francisco. Like literally spend 5 hours commuting 3 to 4 days a week, right, to go work at this company to make a third or less of what I was making as an executive at CoreLogic, right? So having those mission-driven people, people like me, then that also transferred to finding people like Charles and Yen and Ram and Zan and Nicholas and other people that Curtis is another guy who was an early sales engineer. Like all of these guys. Yen was working at Bridgewater Associates, biggest hedge fund in the world. Ram was on the trading desk at Bain. Charles was a consultant for PwC. I mean, these guys were making good money and had very happy lives. And all of them left those jobs, moved to San Francisco, took significant pay cuts because they wanted to be part of the mission. And, if you're sitting there wondering, like, how do I hire some great salesperson that's going to give me a Rolodex of customers? It's not about that. It's about finding that team of people that come hell or high water, they're going to make it work. I remember Yen, one day we did a presentation on, I think it was on Monday, down in Dallas for president of a really large company. And Yen, the day before was the Super Bowl. I think actually the presentation was on Tuesday. We traveled on Monday. Sunday was the Super Bowl. And Yen spent all day on Super Bowl Sunday working on this presentation that we were going to do. I think that was his day. Super Bowl Sunday, everybody else in the world is out enjoying the Super Bowl and the party, and he's working on this presentation. Like you can't pay for that. You just got to find those people. So that's number 3 is team. And number 4 is implementation. Everything is about the implementation in those early days, making sure the customers have what they want. What do customers need? What adjustments do you need to make based on what they need? And also, on the flip side, and this is where a lot of times, Pranay, who was a VP of product, head of product at the time, he and I would often butt heads about things. And I think that's a relatively common phenomenon when you have a head of product and a head of sales in an early stage company. Head of sales, like, I'm very customer driven, want to sell the product. I want to make sure customers get what they want. And the head of product, their job is to make sure that the product roadmap is following to execute on the mission vision of the company. And it's easy to get steered in the wrong direction from your current customers. Oh, I need this thing or I need that thing. There's the old adage, if you ask people what they wanted 100 years ago, they'd say faster horses, right? But instead we need to build the automobile. And so it's, when you're thinking about those implementations, making sure that everything you're doing is, one, what is best, like number one, what is best for the customer? What kind of service do you have to provide? What kind of 2 a.m. QA testing do you have to do? What kind of documentation do you have to do? If it means taking data out and creating that spreadsheet for them. And then also being rigid. What's best for the customer may not be, we need the ability to download CSV files. Because what are you going to do with the CSV files? Put them into a spreadsheet? We're trying to get away from spreadsheets in the first place. That's why we built the system. Right. So doing what's best for the customer. And that's that balance between product roadmap and customer needs. That's so important. Implementation. Our first workflow implementation at NationStar was a good 6 months before we got to the next one down the road. And we didn't worry about customer 2 or 3 or 4 on the workflow. Everything was all hands on deck. We had teams of people flying to and from Dallas every single week for months, including engineers and product people and customer people and founders, working up and down the organization to make sure the first implementation went well and the customer's happy. If you're just worried about building the product and then releasing it and hoping that the customers use it the right way, you're just not going to get out of that startup phase. So number 4 is just implementation focused. So those are the 4. Those are my 4 things in my post-it note. And that's my first LinkedIn Live. So I'm kind of curious on how this looks right now. Hopefully it came out well enough. I'm going to be doing more of these. I'll get a regular schedule going of this. I've got lots of ideas that I'm sketching out. I want to make sure that they're right for everyone here. And once we get into a regular schedule, I'll look to see you all on a more regular basis. So that's it for now. So congratulations to the team at Blend. Still a couple people there from the early days. Obviously, I'm excited for them. I'm excited for just for the company to see, and I'm excited for Nima and Roscoe and Eugene and Aaron to see their vision coming through. And I'm excited that I was able to be a part of it for a couple of years, getting that early liftoff and getting on the path to 1.7 billion, and what I'm sure will be multiples of that in the coming years. So great job, guys, over there. And if you have any other questions about stuff like this, I mean, this is what the work that I do every day, the work that the team does here every day over at our company, Sales Qualia, is all helping early stage, growth stage companies get on that path to making the impact that you want to make in your company, with your company, in your industry. So we work a lot with seed stage, Series A round stage companies. A lot of the companies in our implementation program are focused on getting to that first $1 million in revenue. We have several clients that are at $1 million plus, trying to get to 3, and then from 3 to 10. So if you're in that stage and you want some help getting really, really clear on the systems you need to build, the processes you need to be put in place, how do you get those earliest customers, get on that path to making the $1 billion impact that you want to make, then send me a DM and just let me know. We'll have a chat. All right, that's it for now. I'm going to finish up. LinkedIn Live #1 in the book.